on an all-new Dr. Phil. They were witnesses to a killing.
My friend just shot himself in the head.
Did you actually see him shoot himself?
Yeah, but I don't remember anything.
Was it suicide?
None of us had anything to do with your son's death.
I don't think that they're telling the truth.
Or something else?
He thinks one of you three shot Jake.
Grieving parents
If the gun was at a slightly downward angle, how did the bullet end up in the ceiling?
want answers.
I can't explain to you how the bullet ended up that way.
The mysterious death of Jacob Limberios.
I'm just upset that I even have to be here.
Well, is that inconvenient for you? Haunting screams from a night that forever changed the lives of 4 young adults and their families. What started as a night of friends hanging out suddenly took a very wrong turn and ended up with one of them dead and the other 3 at the center of a real-life mystery. Now, according to the grieving family, they say that initially there was no police investigation, no coroner at the scene, and no autopsy. They were simply left with a death certificate that said suicide and a mountain of unanswered questions. 2 exhumations, 2 autopsies, and nearly 2 years of twists and turns makes this a mystery like we have never seen before. Today, we're going to try to get to the bottom of exactly what happened that cold March night in a small Ohio town. Was it suicide? Was it an accident? Or was it something far more sinister?
My 19-year-old son, Jake, was found dead with a bullet through his head. The coroner deemed it as a suicide, but I don't believe them. On the night of March 2nd, Jake approached me about having his best friends over, and they wanted to drink. I told him absolutely not, and he left this house. He was with 3 friends, Evan, Brittany, and then William. He went down to Brittany's house. Jake had a .357 Magnum revolver. This was Jake's gun. And he apparently said, "Do you guys want to go back outside and shoot?" So all of them went out back and shot at a white bucket. Jake apparently unloaded the casings, passed them out as a souvenir. I'm told that Brittany picked up a live round, handed it to Jake, and Jake put it back in the gun. He was standing in the middle of the room. The kids claimed that Jake put the gun up to his head and pulled the trigger. I got a call from Jake's girlfriend. Apparently, her sister, Brittany, had called her and said that Jake was shot. She called me in a panic.
Mike looked white as a ghost, and he only said to me, "Something's wrong with Jake."
I remember pulling down the road that the house is on, and I see nothing but lights flashing. I just took off running as fast as I could. An officer said I could not go in there. This was a crime scene, and told me, "I'm sorry, your son is dead." Sorry, guys. I remember going back to my van, and I was throwing up. I couldn't see. I was like I was blind.
I just remember being in shock and thinking, no, this isn't happening.
The coroner never came to the scene that night. The sheriffs make a ruling of suicide before they even take the kids in for written statements. Things just did not add up. I know my son, he would not commit suicide.
Well, with the strong belief that his son did not take his own life, Mike searches for answers.
We started questioning the suicide right away. One of the first suspicious things that we realized at the funeral home is that Jake was shot in the left side of the head, and Jake is right-handed. There's a mistake here.
It never dawned on us that it would be labeled as suicide. Jake was not suicidal.
We wanted the coroner to order an autopsy. We asked for that for months with denial. No.
The sheriff's department closed the investigation, saying the investigation was over.
When they closed down the investigation, I became the investigator, and I started gathering material, everything I could. And so we made a decision to have Jake exhumed. We approached Dr. Sarah Wecht for this autopsy.
Dr. Wecht did not find any stippling or gunshot powder residue on Jake's head. Dr. Wecht ruled that the gun had to be at least 18 inches from Jake's head, and that he couldn't have done it.
He said, forget about which side Jacob was shot on. Answer the real question, was it possible that Jacob could have shot himself? The real question is, did Jacob shoot himself or did someone else? We were forced to file a lawsuit against the coroner just to change the death certificate.
Once we had filed the lawsuit with the county, they then decided that they wanted to do their own autopsy.
The second autopsy's findings were different from Dr. Wecht's. It was suggested that the bullet entered the right side and exited the left side of Jacob's head. Everyone else said it was left to right. I want to clear Jake's name from the suicide that's on his death certificate so his 4-year-old daughter doesn't have to grow up and think that her daddy put a gun to his head. All three of the witnesses, I don't think that they're telling the truth.
If Dr. Phil can get us the truth, it would be the miracle I've been praying for.
I won't stop until there is justice for Jake.
Well, Mike and Shannon, first off, as a father, let me tell you, as a parent, how sorry I am for your loss. I mean, I just can't even imagine getting that phone call and hearing what you heard. So I'm very, very sorry for your loss. Tell me, I just want to go to the end and work backwards. Bottom line, what do you think happened?
With what I know today, Dr. Phil, there's 2 forensic pathologists that say that this is a homicide.
So there were 3 other people in the room.
Yes.
Will, Evan, and Brittany.
Yes.
And you do not think that either one of them had malice, any of the 3 of them had malice towards your son, wanted him dead, shot him to kill him? You're not suggesting that?
No.
You don't believe
Jake
that?
didn't even know 2 of the 3 people there. Mm-hmm. He'd never met them.
Okay, he didn't know Will and Evan?
No.
He knew Brittany?
Yes.
Okay. So you think one of those 3 messing around with the gun, playing with the gun or something, it went off and he was accidentally shot?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We don't know what happened in that house that night.
But I didn't, what I ask you is what you believe, because after all of this time, you've got to embrace some conclusion or belief, and you think it was an accidental shooting, but not by your son. What do you think, Shannon?
I absolutely believe it was an accident. I don't believe that Jake did it, and I don't believe that whoever did it on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are those that would say that no parent wants to believe that their son, that their child would intentionally hurt themselves, intentionally take their own life.
Right.
Is it possible he shot himself accidentally? Who told the investigator that the moment before Jake was shot, he yelled out a warning, "The gun is loaded"? And later, did you actually see him shoot himself?
Yeah, but I don't remember.
If you do know something about this, you need to give that up. Is it possible he shot himself accidentally?
I'm sure that it's possible. If you look at the entrance wound or the exit wound, because there is some controversy right now over whether it was left to right or right to left. We were told initially it was left. He was shot behind the left ear. He was right-handed. That question never arose. Nobody asked us. Mm-hmm. And we didn't find out about that until we were making the funeral arrangements. If it were left to right, it exited up here. Now, either way, it's going to be very difficult for Jake to maneuver holding a gun here, or it'd be very difficult for him to have shot himself either way.
Let's talk about his psychological profile. This was not a young man with a history of depression, correct? I mean, he was not...
He had struggled a year and a half before.
Yeah, but this is a year and a half before.
Right, a year and a half before. I mean, he was a young father. He was 16 years old when Ella was born.
Yeah, a lot of stress and pressure at that point.
Working and going to school, finishing school. No, at this point, he was extremely excited that his two best friends that had gone away to college were coming home, and he hadn't seen them since Christmas. I mean, he was really excited. They've been
Is that
best
who he
friends.
had just talked to on the phone?
That's one of the boys he was talking to.
One of the boys, that's who he had just hung the phone
Yes.
up before this happened.
Right.
So, and the other three in the room report that he was very happy at the time. He was happy when he hung up the phone, that he was happy during the drive, that there were no indications that he was stressed out, withdrawn, depressed, sad, confused, anything.
No.
No indications at all that there would be an emotional underpinning to explain him taking his own life.
No.
And they said seconds before he was happy. He had hung up the phone, he was happy, everybody was kind of cutting up. And so what I'm saying is, from a psychological standpoint, there was nothing antecedent to this that would suggest it. This would have been a 180. He was happy and doing well at the time.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you guys have said that some of the questions that you want answered is why there was no preservation of evidence at the scene, right? You challenge that. Why wasn't any competent death scene investigator called to evaluate it? That includes coroner, a detective, BCI, anybody. Those things bother you. That they didn't treat this with a consideration for alternatives.
Correct.
Okay. Now, there are a number of things that bother you about this. If Jake was standing with the gun pointed at his head at a slightly downward angle, which is what was initially reported, how did the bullet end up in the ceiling? Right? If he was pointing the gun down, how did it wind up in the ceiling? It would have to be some type of deflection, which I suppose under some circumstances could happen. You say it was reported at the scene that a witness told the lead investigator that the moment before Jake was shot, he yelled out a warning that the gun was loaded, right?
Yes.
So the investigator said that it was reported that right before this happened, he yelled out a warning, the gun is loaded.
Be careful, there's one more in there.
Yeah, be careful, there's one more in there. But this wasn't documented anywhere?
Not by the sheriff's department, I don't believe.
And how do we know he said that? Who told the investigator?
It's in recordings that the three witnesses,
Okay.
They say that in
Their audio.
Right, all right. And we have a whole list of questions. Why did the Sheriff's Department and coroner rule this was a suicide with no investigation? A witness said that the gun was moved prior to the sheriff arriving at the scene, but nobody dealt with that. Nobody touched on it. Brittany was allowed to change her clothes. You know, why would that take place if there's a proper investigation going on? And on and on. We have additional questions, and we'll talk about those as we go along. We've got to take a break right now. Brittany and Will are here. They were in the room at the time. We're going to find out why they say they are now victims and that Mike is making their lives hell. We'll be right back.
The next thing I know, I hear a really loud shot. Jacob is lying in front of me and blood is coming out of his head.
His body hit the ground like rocks. The whole living room shook when he fell.
On March 2nd, 2012, 19-year-old Jacob Limberios was shot in the head and killed. His death was ruled a suicide. The three friends who were with him that night say he shot himself by accident. His family says not only would Jake never commit suicide, but there is no way Jake would have been so careless. After all, it was his gun, and he was well aware of gun safety. His family believes the witnesses are lying and that it was actually one of them who accidentally shot Jake, but they're afraid to tell the truth. Two of the three witnesses are here today speaking out for the first time. Take a look as Brittany and Will tell their side of the story.
The day that Jake died started off like any other day. Jake and I made plans to have a party at my house. It was me, William, Evan, and Jacob. I have no idea why Jacob is carrying his gun. He was always carrying brass knuckles and his knives. Out in the country, that's what you do for fun. I maybe had 3 beers. Jake, I don't think, had even one.
He mentioned he had a loaded gun on him. I didn't know what to think. He was like, would you guys like to go outside and shoot it?
So we go out to the backyard. Jacob tells us to shoot at the white bucket.
I shot it twice. Evan shot it, and then Brittany shot it. Jacob also shot it. Jacob asked if any of us wanted to shoot the last bullet, and I said no, it was freezing out.
We all start heading back inside. Jacob disperses the shell casings, the empty ones, all over the floor. He just said, here's one for each of you for a trophy for shooting the gun for the first time. And there was one live one left, and I gave it back to him. And Jacob put it back into the gun.
I remember looking down, I bought a bag of combos. And I remember opening the bag and going in to eat a couple. All 3 of us were sitting on the couch, and there's an ottoman right next to me. That's where I last placed the gun.
He picked up the gun off of the ottoman, and the next thing I know, I hear a really loud shot. I look over towards a window in my kitchen, expecting it to, like a shot to be in the wall over there, and then Jacob is lying in front of me and blood is coming out of his head.
His body hit the ground like rocks. The whole living room shook when he fell, and we all ran to the kitchen.
I got a towel and tried to stop the bleeding and couldn't stop screaming.
I could smell the gunpowder, and that really stuck with me. And I looked around the corner, and I seen him laying on the ground as if he was sleeping. I knew he was gone when I looked in the room.
William called 911 first, and then gave the phone to Evan.
Listen, I need 911. My friend just shot himself in the head. Okay? Is he moving? Breathing?
No, it was his gun. It was a 3 something crazy. We pulled it out, and he shot himself in the head.
I just remember Brittany scream 40 minutes straight.
Stay on the line. Calm down.
I remember yelling at her because I couldn't get her to stop screaming.
I asked the police if I could change my clothes. I was in socks and my pants were all muddy. The cops were nice enough to let me do that. I asked them for my shoes, and the cop said that you don't want your shoes. My shoes were bloody.
I didn't go back in the room. I knew it would traumatize myself to see him.
I was put into a cop car and escorted to the police station. I told the police it was an accident.
I went to the funeral, and it was very awkward. It was my feeling that the family looked at us like we had something to do with this.
The funeral didn't even feel like it was real. It felt like a dream. I stayed with Mike and Shannon and my sister. I wanted to be with my family, but it just got to be too much over there. Mike believes that we did something wrong. He's caused so much pain. He already knows that Jake shot himself. He just doesn't want to believe it. So why do I have to wake up every morning feeling like I want to die?
It's hurting more people than it is helping. I don't blame Mike for trying to find the truth, but he just doesn't accept the truth.
I am not lying. Losing Jacob was the worst thing that's happened to any of us.
Well, Brittany and Will are joining us now, and I appreciate y'all being here. You were in the room when this happened. It's a terrible thing for y'all to be exposed to, and I know it's had an effect. You said that you believe that he thinks one of you three shot Jake.
Yes.
And you understand that Mike and Shannon both believe that if in fact that happened,
It was accidental.
that it was an accident. They're not saying that either one of you did anything on purpose or that you wanted to hurt Jake or kill him or anything of the sort. So they're not accusing you of that. But what they're saying is, if there was an accident, give them the peace of mind of knowing it was an accident. They already don't think you did anything wrong. They're just saying they don't think you're telling everything that you know. What do you say about that, Brittany?
With all due respect, there was an accident that happened there that night, you guys, and that was your son accidentally shooting himself. He did it. We weren't expecting it to happen. We don't even know how it happened. But we're here. It happened. And we're not detectives. We weren't waiting with our steno pads, getting the degree of the anglage down. We weren't doing any of that. But we didn't do anything wrong. We tried to tell you guys everything that we knew. And that's all we've been doing.
So you didn't see anything? Did you actually see him shoot himself?
Yeah, but I don't remember anything, and I don't know why it frustrates me.
Right. But you did see it. Where were you when it took place?
If Shannon was Jake, I was right there. I was right here. He was standing like that, right there.
Right. And if anyone else had done anything, you would have seen it?
Yes.
And you maintain that this was Jake, that nobody else had anything to do with this, correct?
Yes.
And you understand why they want to know.
Of course, it's their son. Of
And you
course.
understand they're not blaming you. They're not blaming you. They're not blaming Evan, who isn't here. They're just saying they just want to know. And I, of course, I wasn't there. I don't know. But I'm telling the two of you, if you do know something about this, even if you've said that you didn't before, if you do, you need to give that up. They deserve that peace, and you deserve that freedom. This isn't something you want to carry around with you the rest of your life, and this isn't something you want them to suffer with the rest of their lives. If you have the ability to set them free with information, then you should do that.
This just feels like I'm in court again, or having to tell my story for a 5th time.
Well, is that inconvenient for you? If you have the ability to set them free with information, then you should do that, right?
But what happens when we have been doing that and we have been telling the truth and they still don't believe us and this still happens?
Well, what do you say?
I feel the same way. From the start, I've said, there's nothing that can change what happened, but none of us had anything to do with your son's death. None of us had anything to do with it.
And
it just feels like another deposition. This just feels like I'm in court again, or having to tell my story for a 5th time.
well, is that inconvenient for you?
Well,
Are you complaining about them asking you?
Well, that's what we've been telling them for 2 years almost.
I understand. I just want to know what it is you're saying. What is it? You're saying this just feels like another deposition. This feels like I'm being questioned.
There's
again.
nothing else I could say about the matter. There's nothing else that happened that night. There's nothing I could say that would release them from their suffering, and it makes me feel terrible that there's nothing I could do about it. I've told the truth from day one. I've took the lie detector test. I'll take another one. I have just nothing able to say that could help you.
The reason that that they keep hanging on to this, and it may have nothing to do with either of the two of you, it just may be that people didn't do their jobs. That they just didn't do their jobs right. But that's no reason for y'all to get irritated with them because they're asking the question. Put yourself in their position. What would you be doing? Would if your son's life was gone, would you just say, despite all these inconsistencies, I'll just say, okay, well, you know, moving on? You wouldn't do that.
Of course not.
Then don't expect them to do it, and don't get irritated if they ask a question. Here's the thing. There's physical evidence here. If someone shoots themselves in the head, that is an explosion. It is a gunpowder explosion. And gunpowder explosion leaves powder burns. It's called stippling. They leave powder burns. Okay? There aren't any. You've ever watched a gun fire in slow motion? You see fire comes out of the end of it. There are gunpowder particles, and fire erupts from the end of it, and that burns whatever's right there. And unless you're 18 inches or more away, that's that far. I mean, out here and back.
I can't explain why.
Well, I can't either.
I'm not a detective.
No, but I'm asking you, do you understand why they're saying that that the physical evidence doesn't support the reports of what happened? You get that, right?
Yeah, and I don't.
That doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, but you understand they're saying there's an anomaly here, that it doesn't add up. The report says that the bullet entered the left back of the head. If that's true, with a .357 Magnum, you could probably replicate that 100 times, and that bullet would be on a trajectory, not perfectly straight, but it would certainly be moving left to right. And this one made a U-turn and wound up almost on the plane where it started. It came in, went out the top, and turned and went to the ceiling instead of out a window. So they look at that and say, physically speaking, they can't resolve that in some way. And they're hoping that y'all might know something that maybe you don't even know you know that might help them in some way.
Maybe his head was turned. Maybe
I can't explain.
Yeah,
I
we
have no
can't.
I can't either. And
thought about it.
you know, y'all aren't
Nights,
forensic
100
specialists. I'm not expecting you to know that. I'm just saying, but you should have empathy for why they.
And we do. We do. Don't
why
get
they're
that
asking
wrong.
these questions.
Yeah, we understand. We understand, guys. Like, we have done everything for them that they've asked. They've asked us to do polygraph tests. We were more than willing to do that. We did that, within the next 2 weeks after that. And then we've answered countless questions for everybody, for everyone involved. We've been asked questions, and we've answered them, and to the best of our knowledge, every single time. And we do have sympathy, and we do respect you guys, and we do understand why you're doing this. It just gets to be hard on us. We try to forget about this night every single day. Every day. And to be asked constantly, over and over, for it to be brought up is, you know. And we see all the Facebook stuff, and we see how everybody else from my school looks at me and thinks about me. It hurts. It really hurts.
We can accept that it was like Jake left that night and he got into a bad car accident and we lost Jake. We can understand how that would happen. We don't think that you guys did anything malicious. This is for finding out the truth. I'm going to have to tell Ella someday, you guys, if it's not exactly what happened, help me so that I can explain this to Ella someday. What happened?
I wouldn't lie to you, Mike. I wouldn't lie to the cops. If somebody else would have did it, I would have told him that night. Plain and simple. Plain and simple.
Well, let's take a break.
This is the house where Jacob died. The couch was here. The bullet ended up in this end of the room, in the ceiling. Jakey had to be laying right here.
Well, Mike went back to the house where Jake was killed and demonstrated what he believes took place. Let's get that out, and then we can talk about it.
This is the house where Jacob died. He had to be standing somewhere in this area. The couch was here. An ottoman was in front of this window. You can actually see the ottoman in some of the pictures. The bullet ended up in this end of the room, in the ceiling. Brittany says that he was looking in her eyes. Shot in the left side, makes the bullet go out the picture window here. Doesn't make it go up there. My theory, if Jake was here, Evan, Brittany, Will on the ottoman, the gun was said that it was on the ottoman, picked it up, was playing with the hammer of the gun. If they were goofing around and Will did some move, Jake would have done a defensive move. No, slightly turned towards the pass-through to the kitchen. The gun goes off through the left side, up into the ceiling. From what I've read and understand, typically suicides are in the temple, like this, and with your dominant hand. The bullet entered more in the back in the colicky area. It was not in the temple, more in the back of his head. And Brittany tells me that he hit his knees and fell back, and Jakey had to be laying right here. I've been in this house and gone over this through my mind 100 times. I'm just trying to tell what I believe happened.
Is Mike making some wrong assumptions here? I believe he is after the truth, and if he's making some wrong assumptions, let's straighten those out so he can think about this differently. What's he saying that's wrong? Because y'all were there.
The first thing is none of us shot him. None of us had anything to do with him. There was no defensive maneuver. There was no him. It has nothing to do with us. We weren't the last people to touch the gun. There's nothing else I could tell you about what happened. I was not sitting on the ottoman. I'm sorry that...
Sitting in the chair.
All the investigations we've had to talk to investigators probably 3 different times within 4-month periods each time. I'm sorry if there's little inconsistencies as where I went to eat or exactly where we're sitting, but in the end, we were all on the same side of the house. I can't explain to you how the bullet ended up that way. I can't explain to you why the forensics people can't figure out which way the bullet went in or out. That's all just ridiculous that they couldn't have done their job in the first place. I'm just upset that I even have to be here, and I'm upset that you had to lose your son, but I can't help you answer the questions you want answered.
It makes me mad to watch that and to think that you really do think one of us were to do it.
We never thought it was
He just
intentional.
said that.
We never said it was intentional. We know you, Brittany, well enough to know that accidents happen. They happen to good people every day.
And this is an accident that Jake caused.
It is an accident that was labeled suicide.
Yeah, that's...
And we know, and I think you know too, that it was not a suicide.
He was the happiest person ever.
I even have that in my statements that he didn't do it.
We
on
all
purpose.
did.
I know he didn't.
It was a freak accident. Maybe he just didn't remember the safety was on, Mike. I don't know what he was thinking. All I know is that we are here now, and to watch you do that.
It's just everything that I have put in front of me, guys. It says that Jake...
Okay, well, if we're all sitting on this side of the room, and the bullet is behind us, if one of us were to shot Jake, wouldn't it be over in the other side? Have you ever thought about that?
I know you want answers. I did not cock the gun in any way. I did not have any hand in the gun going off.
Well, listen, I've been through everything each of you said in your interviews, and there were inconsistencies in your reports, but I have to say, I did not see an inconsistency there that I thought was unusual or unexpected. I mean, they seemed to me, you know, you'd say, well, I was kind of here, kind of there. I frankly was surprised that you could be as accurate as you were given the circumstances. You know, if it was exactly, precisely consistent every time, that would concern me, because psychologically that would suggest rehearsal and spitting it out exactly the same way every time. So I have to say, regarding the inconsistencies, I didn't see an inconsistency of consequence. And I know that you've said, well, he said he was he on the chair, or was he on the ottoman, or whatever. I didn't see anything significant there. And I think you've reported things a little different from one time to the next, but I think it's a function of how the question was asked and what you remember at the time. And so I didn't see anything there that goes, oh, well, that tells me these guys are lying. I just, that to me was insignificant. You did say something in one of the interviews that I was curious about, Will. You said, I believe, they've said you said, that you heard him say, be careful, there's still one in there.
Yeah, he did tell me that. When it was the last, when we came in after we fired the gun, he passed it around one more time. We all looked at it. He gave us our casings as a souvenir, you know, for the first time ever shooting. I explained to him, you know, I never shot except a .22, but I do. Anyways, he, you know, we all looked at the gun last time, and I placed a lot of men, and he picked it back up. I don't know if he had a holster or where he was keeping the gun. My first report, that's where I thought he had the gun, but there might have not been one. I don't know. I just know that he picked up the gun, and before, when it was getting passed around, he just told us to be careful, you know, that there was one more left in there. We didn't shoot all 6 bullets outside. And I said, yes, I understand that. Right. And I put it down. I did not cock the gun in any way. I did not have any hand in the gun going off whatsoever. The last person to have the gun was him. I can't explain to you guys how it happened. I don't understand how so many investigators could be on this situation and still not be able to figure it out. So, you know, something's wrong somewhere, and I totally understand that from your point of view. If I had a son, I would do the same thing you're doing. It's just, you know, we can't let go until you guys can let go, and I know you want answers, and I can't give you the answers that you're looking for.
Only tomorrow.
The shooting of 19-year-old Jacob Limberios.
Unraveling a mysterious death.
It was labeled suicide. We think you know that it was not a suicide.
I know for a fact that he shot himself.
The science says it couldn't have happened that way. If there's something you know,
There's not.
I have been telling the truth. Jacob did this to himself.
Brittany's your girlfriend. Are you covering for her?
No.
The witnesses agreed to take a polygraph.
I just feel like as if I got set up to do this.
That's offensive.
This is for TV, right?
This is for a boy's life.
What will the tests reveal?
I have the results here. The results are...
Jacob, why are you doing this to me? Why?
That's tomorrow.
Look, we're out of time, so we are going to continue this conversation tomorrow. Jake's parents are determined to get answers, and so they did something that would be very, very difficult for any parent. They exhumed their son's body. The question is why? Well, they wanted that autopsy. That never happened. And so they hired their own pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wecht. He says science doesn't lie, and we'll have those results tomorrow. Plus, Will and Brittany each took lie detector tests to prove that what they are saying is true. Will Mike and Shannon finally get the answers they want so they can get some closure on this and move on? We'll answer all of these questions and more tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for being here.